Good day and welcome to our Coffee and Cloud series webcast, Managing IT Inflation. I'm Alan Falcon, CEO of Cumulus Global, and I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day and week to join us for this Coffee and Cloud session here today, whether you're here in the live session or watching this recording on demand. We appreciate you joining us. Before we get started, a couple of quick reminders that the audio is muted to prevent any background noise from interfering with the session. If at any time during the session you've got a question, along the right-hand side or top of your screen, there's some icons. One opens the questions window. That's the best way to reach me. I'll keep an eye on it. We'll answer as we go along, and we have time for Q&A at the end of the session as well. This session, along with the Q&A, will be recorded. It'll generally be posted on our website within 24 hours. We'll send you a link once it is. Feel free to share with business associates, acquaintances, if you think they will find the content valuable. This Coffee and Cloud series is one of many resources we publish on a regular basis, including our blog, our library of ebooks and white papers, and our monthly third Tuesday at 3 webcast series. Please take advantage of the Resource Center on our website for additional ideas, issues, and information. With that said, and the pleasantries out of the way and the welcome complete, let's dive into the content. So today we want to cover 4 aspects of IT inflation and how we can manage it. We'll look at 4 key factors that are currently driving costs that we see continuing in the foreseeable future. And then we'll talk about both eliminating existing costs and avoiding new costs, particularly cloud versus clutter and virtual versus physical. And this isn't just a pitch for saying do cloud instead of on-premise. It's also looking at how you might use cloud to maximize the value of your existing on-premise IT as well. So the 4 key factors driving IT inflation right now, as you can, and these might seem overly obvious to some, the first being demand, that we are seeing continued steady growth in demand for not only physical equipment, but cloud services. In fact, early on in the pandemic, Microsoft was stretched in their ability to expand the capacity of their cloud data centers to meet increasing demand. Similarly, we're seeing continued high and increasing demand for on-premise equipment, predominantly end-user devices, so laptops and desktops, particularly as older devices continue to age out, and with upgrades to Windows 10 and now Windows 11 operating system and newer versions of software, demand for increased CPU performance and memory. Not as much demand for larger disk space locally because we are using the cloud for much more frequently for cloud storage and file storage, but certainly the performance indicators of processor speed, graphics processing units, and onboard RAM or random access memory are definitely up, and the demand, has pushed the need to upgrade aging laptops and desktops, and we see that. We also see demand for improved local area networking, particularly around wireless access points, wireless routers, and security capabilities for on-premise computing. The second key factor is talent. No surprise here that I'm going to talk about the staffing shortages and increasing labor costs. And this isn't just with your local IT provider like us, who might be struggling to fill open positions. We're not currently, but many are, just to clarify that. But it goes all the way back to staffing of manufacturing, distribution functions, really the entire supply chain and the entire life cycle of your physical technology. There are issues with staffing and increased labor costs, and that's being reflected not only in the pricing, but in the time it takes for things to turn around or things to arrive, to get from the factory through the warehouse to your office. The third factor is that supply chain. We continue to see significant issues and imbalances, and this is, isn't just the distribution problems that we have with shipping backlogs, misalignment of shipping containers versus where the need is, delays at offloading in ports, shortage of over-the-road truck drivers in North America. This actually goes all the way back to manufacturing into factory availability, factory staffing, and raw material supplies, component supplies, and logistics. And so the entire supply chain continues to struggle to normalize or reach equilibrium post-pandemic. And there's no easy fix in sight that's going to make this magically go away. We expect this to continue for the better part of this year, if not well into 2023. And the fourth key factor is energy. Here in the US, with big pricing signs on almost every corner, it's very obvious what's happening with the cost of over-the-road diesel fuel and gasoline for consumers in delivery, but the energy prices being in flux has other ramifications as well. And so, increased energy costs, particularly in energy used to generate electricity, is impacting the cost of both on-premise computing and cloud solutions, right? So we've seen, for example, Microsoft earlier this year acknowledged that their operating costs for Microsoft 365 and Azure were on the rise, and they've made pricing adjustments for some of, for the Microsoft 365 licenses, but also for some of the Azure services to better reflect the cost differentials that are happening in that environment. We see the same thing with Google Cloud Platform, and certainly with last year's change from branding of G Suite to Google Workspace, there were some price changes for comparable capability there as well, some of them significant. And one of the underlying factors of that is energy. Knowing that, for example, it costs more to cool servers in a data center than it does to power them, it can be pretty demanding. And that energy cost is one of the factors also driving higher delivery, transportation, manufacturing costs. It is affecting all aspects end to end of that supply chain. And again, prices may come down, prices may not come down. They may continue to move up and down as nations, given the political situation in the world and the economic situation in the world, as energy producing and exporting nations, organizations continue to look to maximize profits, which doesn't necessarily mean increasing supply and lowering costs to energy consumers, whether that be individuals or businesses or data centers or factories, doesn't really matter. So we see these four key factors driving IT inflation in measurable and demonstrable ways. And at this point, there's no easy solution to address any one, let alone all four of these in concert. And so it's going to take time for the global economy and regional economies to work themselves forward. It would certainly be easier if political situations around the world were more stable. That's not apparently going to happen anytime soon either. So a little bit of doom and gloom, what you can do? Well, there are a couple of things you can do. And the first thing is, let's talk about managing IT costs and eliminating costs for things you're already doing. And the first thing we recommend everyone do, we actually have third-party tools that can help you do this, but you want to scan for any unused services, right? And so there are a number of different statistics out there, and I thought about throwing up some slides with some different numbers, but basically, a small business, that's typical of our customer base and the small mid-sized companies we talk to, people with 1 to 300 employees, will have anywhere from 4 to 35 or 40 different cloud subscription or IT subscription services. And many of those were purchased, or they were tried on a free trial. They converted to monthly fee. Maybe they were used for a while. You stop using them. You think, okay, if I don't start using it, I'll cancel. You forget about it. It's still out there. So one of the things we recommend is that you scan your business credit cards and ask employees to scan a couple of statements of their cards and identify any IT services that are showing up as auto payments or recurring payments, and determine whether or not you're actually using them. And if you're not, let's stop those subscriptions. And for some companies that have done this, we've seen companies save anywhere from a couple $100 to a couple $1,000 a month in costs for IT services they're no longer using or they never really used to begin with. And we see this not just, it's good to look at your payables as well, because we see this in simple things such as subscriptions to maybe a file sharing service that you wanted to test, and after a couple months decided it wasn't working, but it never actually got shut down. We also see organizations that have spun up tenants in Microsoft Azure for testing. They do their test is complete. They leave that test environment and set up their production tenant as a different tenant, as is good practice, but then they actually never go back in and shut down the servers and the resources in that testing tenant, and they end up paying monthly for that as well. And that can be several $100s a month easily. And so definitely check for your unused services. Then there's an area, and it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, admittedly. We've talked about it in a number of webcasts and in our blog posts in the past, and it's redundant services. And this is, easy definition here. If you have a capability or a service that's offered by one product or service that you subscribe to, and then you elect to pay for that service through a second service, you've got redundant services. You're paying for the same thing twice. And there are a couple of areas where we see this to be pretty prominent. One of them is file sharing, right? So the company will move into Microsoft 365 or will migrate them into Google Workspace, and yet they'll still be out there, to do file sharing. They'll still be out there with paid Dropbox for Business or Box or other file sharing service accounts. Now, in some instances, there's a need to do that, and there's a reason to do it. In most cases, it's simply, not finishing the migration process and not ensuring your users and your team understand how to use properly the file sharing capabilities you have. In the Microsoft 365 world, you've got multiple ways of creating that shared file service, whether it's internally or with your customers or with your vendors, internally or externally. And whether it's through OneDrive, SharePoint website, or SharePoint file services, or through Teams, you've got a mechanism to easily share files and information with people on the outside. You don't need, in most cases, and a few you do, but in most cases, you don't need to be paying an additional fee per user per month for a secure version of Box or Dropbox or another file sharing service. The second big area we see is online meetings. Okay, and certainly we have companies that will say, well, I have Microsoft 365 and I can use Teams meetings, but I've got people who like to use Zoom, and therefore we're paying. We don't want the 30-minute limit. We don't want the other restrictions. So we've got people paying a pretty steep price for online meeting service and paying for one of the paid versions of Zoom, or they're paying for WebEx, or they're paying for GoTo. Many, many services out there. And what we find is that there are ways to work around this. So one, make sure your team, whether it's Microsoft Teams or Meets within the Google Workspace ecosystem, make sure your people understand how to use it. And really determine if there is actually a feature in Zoom that they need versus maybe a little more convenient or that they don't need, and see if they can truly live within Teams and Meets. And the other advice we give, right, is that if you're working with another organization and you're gonna, and we see this all the time being, running our business internally on Google Workspace for the most part, we'll go ahead and schedule a Google Meet. Oftentimes, when we're dealing with someone we haven't dealt with before, it's the first time they've used Meet. So if they come back and say, oh, you're doing Google Meet, we've never used it, we'll say, okay, let's plan on joining a few minutes early. It's really easy. And if they come back and say, oh, we really, really prefer using Zoom, we're very comfortable with it, my assumption is that they have a Zoom account. I will say, okay, great. Why don't you send an invite for your Zoom link and let's use their service. So just because we're working with someone who prefers a different online meeting service than we use doesn't mean we have to pay for every one or additional ones. We can let them simply provide the link or schedule the meeting from their end and make it work that way. And again, we've seen small businesses that we're spending over $500 a month on Zoom, another $600 a month for GoTo, when all of their meeting needs were easily done, within the meeting tool built into their productivity suite. The second is, or the third, I should say, is telephony. We'll see people overlap telephony with other services. And some of this can't be avoided, right? Most voice over IP services include a texting feature and include some form of even a basic licensing level of voice and video conferencing. But what we will see, for example, is that companies that are running Google Workspace will have a voice over IP system and still pay for a specific audio conferencing service. right? That's not necessary. It's not as common, but we do see it. And also understand that there are budget voice over IP systems that are budget because they don't have the the audio conferencing, the video conferencing meetings, because they understand you're going to integrate their VoIP with Teams, Teams with phone service, or with Teams for your meetings, or you're going to integrate it with Google Workspace, and that you're going to use Meets and chat for your audio and your video calls. And you don't need that feature in your voice over IP system as part of your unified communication strategy. So check for telephony. And the fourth area, again, not as common, but we still see it, is video streaming. Both Microsoft and Google Workspace, within certain limitations, give you the ability to host and stream content. With Google Workspace, you can actually do an authenticated YouTube account, which gives you a lot of capability for storing and making videos publicly accessible, on a pretty open platform. But both Google Workspace and Microsoft 365 subscriptions have the ability to do secure video streaming. So what this means is that if you've got this in place and you're comfortable using, even if you need a public platform and you're using YouTube, that you don't necessarily need to be paying for Vimeo or another video management and video streaming service. And again, here, I'm not saying you never need those paid services, but most of the companies we see that are paying for those services can now accomplish what they want within the Microsoft 365 or the Google Workspace ecosystem. And it's worth taking a look. And a lot of this evolved because there was a time when if you wanted to do certain things as far as video streaming goes, you would need a Vimeo or another paid service. Those features have now been added into your core productivity suite. You could switch over, migrate, and save some money there. And these aren't the only areas where we see redundant services, but file sharing and online meetings are definitely the most prevalent. And telephony and video streaming are examples of less prevalent ones. It's good to walk through your IT stack and make sure that you're not, replicating, and we can get into an argument that says if I've got Microsoft Teams, should I be paying for Slack? If I've got Microsoft, 365, which includes Planner, do I need to be paying for Trello? You can look at the application level as well, and some of those other services. These are sort of core services that tend to get overlooked and forgotten when people look about eliminating costs for redundant services. Now we want to get into avoiding future costs, and I'm running a little long here, so I'm going to step up the pace a little bit. First, definitely make a shift to a cloud to avoid any capital expenditures. We see companies coming up, servers, laptops, desktops are reaching their useful life. Remember that a lot of those functionalities can be done in the cloud. And when you buy a PC or a laptop, for example, the actual purchase price is going to be only 10 to 20% of the total cost of managing and supporting that device over 3 years. When you take into the software you add onto it, when you take it, to keep it safe, when you talk about the human element for managing the device, depending on your situation, a $1,000 laptop over 3 years is going to cost you anywhere to $5,000 up to provide total support, your total cost of ownership. And what we also see with these capital expenditures is you're increasing your, because of inflation and availability, you're increasing your baseline costs. And a lot of the reason folks are upgrading. So when we look at servers, right, if all you have in your computer closet is an Active Directory server and a file server, we can replace both of those with the cloud services you're already paying for with your Google Workspace or your Microsoft 365 subscription. You can totally eliminate that cost. Now, you'll still want to provide backup to your data when it's in the cloud, just like you do on your physical server, but we can provide that replacement. You have the added benefit when you make that shift of not having to worry about physical device failure, not having to worry about environmental issues or disasters. Your business becomes more reliable and more resilient as well. So, a side benefit. And a new way, not really a new way, but a way growing in popularity and effectiveness as we see it, is to take advantage of virtual desktop infrastructure. And this is really, and I'll get into it in a little more detail, it's a mechanism where you can actually extend the life of your existing PCs and laptops by 1 to as many as 3 years. And it's why? Because the actual processing work is being done on a virtual computer in a cloud data center that locally connects over a secure private network to whatever servers and services you need. So instead of running servers and services on a local area network in your office and maybe having people remote in, everyone, whether they're remote or in the office, connects to your cloud environment. The desktops and the servers run in the cloud. So only that I/O piece comes down to you. And because of that, you don't have to upgrade your laptops and your PCs to meet current requirements to support Windows 10, Windows 11, and your updated software. As a side note, it also improves your security, your availability, and your resilience. Why? Because you're in a cloud data center, highly secure, built-in redundancy. You're geographically not tied to your office anymore. You can access it from anywhere. So it supports that hybrid and remote work as well. In fact, it's the best mechanism for supporting hybrid and remote work. And so how does VDI work? On your PC and laptop, the only thing you run is a virtual desktop client. It needs less processing power, it needs less memory and less disk than running than running applications over your operating system. And that's again where the life extension can happen for those devices. Okay, the virtual desktops through that client connect into a network. There's a whole set of security and management services that are managed by Microsoft, which then let you connect to your servers and your applications. And so you can actually have a Windows, I don't want to say you should have a Windows 7 desktop because it's not supported anymore, or certainly Windows XP desktops aren't, but you can have a Windows 7 or Windows 10 desktop set up on your local laptop. But when you use that VD client, you log in, you can be on the latest Windows 11 or on an enterprise version of Windows 10 that provides additional security and features that you might need if you need it, right? So you have that flexibility, and then you put your servers in the cloud as well, and you get your integration to your Microsoft 365 and your Google Workspace environments as well. So your network systems, applications, and data run in secure cloud services, and it's scalable. So you can have different desktops designed for different users' needs without having to worry about buying more expensive hardware versus less expensive hardware locally. And you can have services match your work cycles. So for example, we have a virtual desktop environment to run some of our back office systems. And we know that generally between 11:30 at night and 5:30 in the morning, no one's using it and no one needs to use it. So we actually spin it down and we stop incurring costs for those 6 hours a day. That effectively lowers our operating cost for those desktops and servers by 25%. Okay, and 5:30 in the morning, everything boots up, everything's refreshed, exactly where it was left off when it shut down after the backups the prior night. And so we can match services. Now we've got other companies we work with that have heavy usage during the day and light usage at night, but they need to be available 24 hours. That's great. We have one or two for these companies. We have one or two sessions standing by overnight. In the morning, we'll spin up other sessions so that they're waiting for people to log in during their heavy usage period and automatically scale back. So again, we can make the system bigger or smaller, not only to individual user needs and the type of systems we spin up, but to match the overall work schedule and work cycle and needs of the business. And again, all of that pushes to savings. So with these ideas in mind, none of this was rocket science, but hopefully a little bit inspirational. We always suggest that you assess your needs. Let's look at your systems, applications, and services. Let's discuss your needs around performance, availability, reliability, and security, or our PARS acronym, and decide if what you still have on-premise can go to the cloud, and if we can help you avoid capital expenditures and all of the additional costs around maintaining on-premise IT. Let's look at help plan a solution. Let's just help you look and explore if virtual desktop services are right for you and when they would be right for you. It would be good to make that move. The cost of that move, your operating cost versus your current total cost of ownership. And then we'll design your solution, looking at your systems and applications, what's the scope and scale of what's needed, and we'll always upfront constantly look at cost optimization to help you mitigate that IT inflation. And once we have that plan, when you're ready, we pull the trigger, we execute, we get you from point A to point B. We ensure your users understand how to access and do their work effectively during the day. We make sure that what you need and what you want for your computing environment is there, from secure access to information, to printing, to communication services. We'll make sure it's all properly integrated and functioning for you in a way that helps your business survive and thrive. On that note, 25 minutes in, a little bit longer than I like to chat on these things, but let me open the floor to Q&A. So if you have any questions, now is the time to open up that questions window using the icon at the top or right-hand side of the screen. If you don't think of your question right now, you'll notice on the screen you can contact us, info@cumulusglobal.com. You can also contact me directly. I don't have an assistant. So and my phone number and email's there. I'll tell you, best off to send me an email. I'm not great about answering the phone if I'm busy, and I'm horrible about answering voicemail. So definitely Falcon, cumulusglobal.com. I'm happy to answer your question, or if I'm busy, have a member of my team get back to you quickly. So one of the questions we often receive about leveraging cloud and moving into a virtual desktop or a Windows desktop service environment is, what does the transition look like? And effectively what we do is, it's a fairly straightforward process. We analyze your applications. We bring in expert engineers to scope the size of the environment that you need and the size of the servers and the virtual desktops you need. We build that out. We can then test it. We then make sure your applications get installed properly and are functioning properly. And then if there's any data to be migrated over as part of this, or a database that has to move with the application, we schedule a cutover, and we run the cutover. We do a test out of work hours, and if things are good, when people come in, instead of logging in and opening up the accounting system, they'll log in and click on the Windows desktop environment or the desktop client. It'll connect, and the accounting system will open for them, and we'll make that happen. We try to make it as seamless to the end user as possible. And of course, we're always accessible by email, phone, and website for support and service. Okay, with no other questions, I want to wrap this up before we get to that magic 30-minute mark. I want to thank everyone for joining us here today. Appreciate you taking your time out of your busy day and week. Again, feel free to reach out with any questions, comments, concerns. We're happy to help you assess whether or not moving into a virtual desktop environment would benefit your business. And if it does, we're happy to help you make the move. If not, we'll help you look for other ways to manage IT inflation. Thanks for joining us, and have a great day.